The Tales of the Laxdale Saga is brought to you by NotaProfit.org, the place on the internet to find spiritual guidance powered by artificial intelligence. The Laxdale Saga Part 9 Chapter 11. Halldor prepares to avenge Kjartan. Now Halldor told Bardi in secret that the brothers had made up their minds to set on Bolli, for they could no longer withstand the taunts of their mother. And we will not conceal from you, kinsman Bardi, that what mostly lay behind the invitation to you was this, that we wished to have your help and fellowship. Then Bardi answered, that will be a matter ill spoken of, to break the peace on one's own kinsman, and on the other hand it seems to me nowise an easy thing to set on Bolli. He has many men about him and is himself the best of fighters, and is not at a loss for wise counsel with Gudrun and Osvif at his side. Taking all these matters together, they seem to me as easy to overcome. Halldor said, there are things we stand more in need of than to make the most of the difficulties of this affair. Nor have I broached it till I knew that it must come to pass, that we make earnest of wreaking revenge on Bolli. And I hope, kinsman, you will not withdraw from doing this journey with us. Bardi answered, I know you do not think it likely that I will draw back. Neither do I desire to do so, if I see that I cannot get you to give it up yourselves. There you do your share in the matter honorably, said Halldor, as was to be looked for from you. Bardi said they must set about it with care. Halldor said he had heard that Bolli had sent his house, carles from home, some north to Ramfirth to meet a ship, and some out to Fell Strand. It is also told me that Bolli is staying at the Outderry in Sailingstale with no more than the house, carles who are doing the haymaking, and it seems to me we shall never have a better chance of seeking a meeting with Bolli than now. So this then Halldor and Bardi settled between them. There was a man named Thorstein the Black, a wise man and wealthy. He lived at Hundedale in the Broadfirth Dales. He had long been a friend of Olaf Peacock's. A sister of Thorstein was called Solveig. She was married to a man who was named Helgi, who was son of Hardbean. Helgi was a very tall and strong man, and a great sailor. He had lately come to Iceland, and was staying with his brother-in-law Thorstein. Halldor sent word to Thorstein the Black and Helgi his brother-in-law, and when they were come to Herdholt, Halldor told them what he was about, and how he meant to carry it out, and asked them to join in the journey with him. Thorstein showed an utter dislike of this undertaking, saying, It is the most heinous thing that you kinsmen should go on killing each other off like that, and now there are but few men left in your family equal to Bolli. But though Thorstein spoke in this wise, it went for naught. Halldor sent word to Lambi, his father's brother, and when he came and met Halldor, he told him what he was about, and Lambi urged hard that this should be carried out. Goodwife Thorgerd also egged them on eagerly to make an earnest of their journey, and said she should never look upon Kjartan as avenged until Bolli paid for him with his life. After this they got ready for the journey. In this raid there were the 4 sons of Olaf, and the 5th was Bardi. There were the sons of Olaf, Halldor, Steinthor, Gi, and Hoskald, but Bardi was Gudmund's son. Lambi was the 6th, the 7th was Thorstein, and the 8th Helgi, his brother-in-law, the 9th An Brushwood-belly. Thorgerd betook herself also to the raid with them, but they set themselves against it, and said that such were no journeys for women. She said she would go indeed, for so much I know of you, my sons, that wetting is what you want. They said she must have her own way. Chapter 11. The death of Bolli. After that they rode away from home out of Herdholt, the 9 of them together, Thorgerd making the 10th. They rode up along the foreshore, and so to Leash, during the early part of the night. They did not stop before they got to Sailingstale in the early morning tide. There was a thick wood in the valley at that time. Bolli was there in the Outderry, as Halldor had heard. The dairy stood near the river at the place now called Bolli's Tofts. Above the dairy there is a large hill rise, stretching all the way down to Stackgill. Between the mountain slope above and the hill rise there is a wide meadow called Barm. It was there Bolli's house. Carles were working. Halldor and his companions rode across Ran, meads unto Oxgrove, and thence above Hammer Meadow, which was right against the dairy. They knew there were many men at the dairy, so they got off their horses with a view to biding the time when the men should leave the dairy for their work. Bolli shepherd went early that morning after the flocks up into the mountain side, and from there he saw the men in the wood as well as the horses tied up, and misdoubted that those who went on the sly in this manner would be no men of peace. So forthwith he makes for the dairy by the straightest cut, in order to tell Bolli that men were come there. Halldor was a man of keen sight. He saw how that a man was running down the mountain side and making for the dairy. He said to his companions that that must surely be Bolli's shepherd, and he must have seen our coming, so we must go and meet him, and let him take no news to the dairy. They did as he bade them. An Brushwood-belly went the fastest of them, and overtook the man, picked him up, and flung him down. Such was that fall that the lad's backbone was broken. After that they rode to the dairy. Now the dairy was divided into two parts, the sleeping room and the byre. Bolli had been early afoot in the morning ordering the men to their work, and had lain down again to sleep when the house carles went away. In the dairy therefore there were left the two, Gudrun and Bolli. They awoke with the din when they got off their horses, and they also heard them talking as to who should first go on to the dairy to set on Bolli. Bolli knew the voice of Halldor, as well as that of sundry more of his followers. Bolli spoke to Gudrun, and bade her leave the dairy and go away, and said that their meeting would not be such as would afford her much pastime. Gudrun said she thought such things alone would befall their worthy of tidings as she might be allowed to look upon, and held that she would be of no hurt to Bolli by taking her stand near to him. Bolli said that in this matter he would have his way, and so it was that Gudrun went out of the dairy. She went down over the brink to a brook that ran there, and began to wash some linen. Bolli was now alone in the dairy. He took his weapon, set his helm on his head, held a shield before him, and had his sword, footbitter, in his hand. He had no mail coat. Halldor and his followers were talking to each other outside as to how they should set to work, for no one was very eager to go into the dairy. Then said An Brushwood-belly, there are men here in this train nearer in kinship to Kjartan than I am, but not one there will be in whose mind abides more steadfastly than in mine the event when Kjartan lost his life, when I was being brought more dead than alive home to Tongue, and Kjartan lay slain. My one thought was that I would gladly do Bolli some harm whenever I should get the chance. So I shall be the first to go into the dairy. Then Thorstein the Black answered, most valiantly is that spoken, but it would be wiser not to plunge headlong beyond heed, so let us go warily now, for Bolli will not be standing quiet when he is beset, and however underhanded he may be where he is, you may make up your mind for a brisk defence on his part, strong and skilled at arms as he is. He also has a sword that for a weapon is a trusty one. Then and went into the dairy hard and swift, and held his shield over his head, turning forward the narrower part of it. Bolli dealt him a blow with footbitter, and cut off the tay, lend of the shield, and clove and through the head down to the shoulder, and forthwith he gat his death. Then Lambi went in. He held his shield before him, and a drawn sword in his hand. In the nick of time Bolli pulled footbitter out of the wound, whereat his shield veered aside so as to lay him open to attack. So Lambi made a thrust at him in the thigh, and a great wound that was. Bolli hewed in return, and struck Lambi's shoulder, and the sword flew down along the side of him, and he was rendered forthwith unfit to fight, and never after that time for the rest of his life was his arm any more use to him. At this brunt Helgi, the son of Hardbean, rushed in with a spear, the head of which was an ell long, and the shaft bound with iron. When Bolli saw that he cast away his sword, and took his shield in both hands, and went towards the dairy door to meet Helgi. Helgi thrust at Bolli with the spear right through the shield and through him. Now Bolli leaned up against the dairy wall, and the men rushed into the dairy, Halldor and his brothers to wit, and Thorgerd went into the dairy as well. Then spoke Bolli, Now it is safe, brothers, to come nearer than hitherto you have done. And said he weened that defence now would be but short. Thorgerd answered his speech, and said there was no need to shrink from dealing unflinchingly with Bolli, and bade them walk between head and trunk. Bolli stood still against the dairy wall, and held tight to him his kirtle, lest his inside should come out. Then Steinthor Olafsson leapt at Bolli, and hewed at his neck with a large axe just above his shoulders, and forthwith his head flew off. Thorgerd bade him hail and joy hands, and said that Gudrun would have now a while a red hair to trim for Bolli. After that they went out of the dairy. Gudrun now came up from the brook, and spoke to Halldor, and asked for tidings of what had befallen in their dealings with Bolli. They told her all that bad happened. Gudrun was dressed in a kirtle of nam stuff one, and a tight, fitting woven bodice, a high bent coif on her head, and she had tied a scarf round her with dark blue stripes, and fringed at the ends. Helgi Hardbjörnsson went up to Gudrun, and caught hold of the scarf end, and wiped the blood off the spear with it, the same spear with which he had thrust Bolli through. Gudrun glanced at him, and smiled slightly. Then Halldor said, "That was blackguardly and gruesomely done." Helgi bade him not be angry about it, for I am minded to think that under this scarf end is the undoer of my life. Then they took their horses and rode away. Gudrun went along with them, talking with them for a while, and then she turned back. Chapter LVI. Bolli Bollisson is born A.D. 1006-7. The followers of Halldor now fell 8. Awking how that Gudrun must think but little of the slaying of Bolli, since she had seen them off chatting, and talked to them all together as if they had done nothing that she might take to heart. Then Halldor answered, "That is not my feeling, that Gudrun thinks little of Bolli's death. I think the reason of her seeing us off with a chat was far rather that she wanted to gain a thorough knowledge as to who the men were who had partaken in this journey. Nor is it too much said of Gudrun that in all mettle of mind and heart she is far above other women. Indeed, it is only what might be looked for that Gudrun should take sorely to heart the death of Bolli. For, truth to tell, in such men as was Bolli there is the greatest loss, though we kinsmen bore not about the good luck to live in peace together." After that they rode home to Herdholt. These tidings spread quickly far and wide, and were thought startling, and at Bolli's death there was the greatest grief. Gudrun sent straightway men to Snorri the priest, for Osvif, and she thought that all their trust was where Snorri was. Snorri started quickly at the bidding of Gudrun, and came to Tung with 60 men, and a great ease to Gudrun's heart his coming was. He offered her to try to bring about a peaceful settlement, but Gudrun was but little minded on behalf of Thorleg to agree to taking money for the slaughter of Bolli. "It seems to me, Snorri, that the best help you can afford me," she said, "is to exchange dwellings with me, so that I be not next door neighbor to the Herdholtings." At that time Snorri had great quarrels with the dwellers at Eyre, but said he would do this for the sake of his friendship with Gudrun. "Yet, Gudrun, you will have to stay on this year at Tung." Snorri then made ready to go away, and Gudrun gave him honorable gifts. And now Snorri rides away, and things went pretty quietly on that year. The next winter after the killing of Bolli, Gudrun gave birth to a child. It was a male, and he was named Bolli. He was at an early age both big and goodly, and Gudrun loved him very much. Now as the winter passed by, and the spring came, the bargain took place which had been bespoken, in that Snorri and Gudrun changed lands. Snorri went to Tung and lived there for the rest of his life, and Gudrun went to Hollafell, she and Osvif, and there they set up a stately house. There Thorleik and Bolli, the sons of Gudrun, grew up. Thorleik was 4 years old at the time when Bolli his father was slain. Chapter LVI. About Thorgils Hallasson, A.D. 1018. There was a man named Thorgils Hallasson. He was known by his mother's name, as she lived longer than his father, whose name was Snorri, son of Alf O'Dales. Halla, Thorgils' mother, was daughter of Gest Odalifson. Thorgils lived in Hordale at a place called Tung. Thorgi was a man great and goodly of body, the greatest swaggerer, and was spoken of as one of no fairness in dealings with men. Between him and Snorri the priest there was often little love lost, for Snorri found Thorgils both meddlesome and flaunting of demeanor. Thorgils would get up many errands on which to go west into the countryside, and always came to Hollafell offering Gudrun to look after her affairs, but she only took the matter quietly and made little of it all. Thorgils asked for her son Thorlake to go home with him, and he stayed for the most part at Tongue and learnt law from Thorgils, for he was a man most skilled in lawcraft. At that time Thorkel Eyjolfsson was busy in trading journeys. He was a most renowned man, and of high birth, and withal a great friend of Snorri the priest. He would always be staying with Thorstein Kuggason, his kinsman, when he was out here in Iceland. Now, one time when Thorkel had a ship standing up in Vadal, on Bardastrand, it befell, in Bergfirth, that the son of Ede of Ridge was killed by the sons of Helga from Crop. Grim was the name of the man who had done the manslaughter, and that of his brother was Enjal, who was drowned in White River. A little later on Grim was outlawed to the woods because of manslaughter, and he lay out in the mountains whilst he was under the award of outlawry. He was a great man and strong. Ede was then very old when this happened, so the case was not followed up. People blamed Thorkel very much that he did not see matters righted. The next spring, when Thorkel had got his ship ready, he went south across Broad Firth country, and got a horse there and rode alone, not stopping in his journey till he got as far as Ridge to Ede. His kinsman, Ede took him in joyfully. Thorkel told him his errand, how that he would go and find Grim his outlaw, and asked Ede if he knew at all where his lair was. Ede answered, I am no. I's eager for this. It seems to me you have much to risk as to how the journey may speed, seeing that you will have to deal with a man of hell's strength, such as Grim. But if you will go, then start with many men, so that you may have it all your own way. That to me is no prowess. Said Thorkel, to draw together a great company against one man. But what one wish is, that you would lend me the sword Skafnung, for then I ween I shall be able to overcome a mere runagate, be he never so mighty a man of his hands. You must have your way in this. Said Ede, but it will not come to me unawares, if some day you should come to rue this wilfulness. But inasmuch as you will have it that you are doing this for my sake, what you ask for shall not be withheld, for I think Skafnung well bestowed if you bear it. But the nature of the sword is such that the sun must not shine upon its hilt, nor must it be drawn if a woman should be near. If a man be wounded by the sword, the hurt may not be healed, unless the healing stone that goes with the sword be rubbed thereon. Thorkel said he would pay careful heed to this, and takes over the sword, asking Ede to point out to him the way to where Grim might have his lair. Ede said he was most minded to think that Grim had his lair north on 2 days, heath by the fish waters. Then Thorkel rode northward upon the heath, the way which Ede did point out to him. And when he had got a long way onward over the heath, he saw near some great water a hut, and makes his way for it. Chapter LVI, Thorkel and Grim, and their voyage abroad. Thorkel now comes to the hut. He sees where a man is sitting by the water at the mouth of a brook, where he was lying, fishing, and had a cloak over his head. Thorkel leapt off his horse and tied it up under the wall of the hut. Then he walks down to the water to where the man was sitting. Grim saw the shadow of a man cast on the water, and springs up at once. By then Thorkel had got very nearly close up to him, and strikes at him. The blow caught him on his arm just above the wolf, joint the wrist, but that was not a great wound. Grim sprang forthwith upon Thorkel, and they seized each other wrestling, wise, and speedily the odds of strength told, and Thorkel fell, and Grim on the top of him. Then Grim asked who this man might be. Thorkel said that did not at all matter to him. Grim said, Now things have befallen otherwise than you must have thought they would, for now your life will be in my power. Thorkel said he would not pray for peace for himself, for lucklessly I have taken this in hand. Grim said he had had enough mishaps for him to give this one the slip, for to you some other fate is ordained than that of dying, at this our meeting, and I shall give you your life, while you repay me in whatever kind you please. Now the both stand up and walk home to the hut. Thorkel sees that Grim was growing faint from loss of blood, so he took Skafnung's stone and rubbed it on, and ties it to the arm of Grim, and it took forthwith all smarting pain and swelling out of the wound. They stayed there that night. In the morning Thorkel got ready to go away, and asked if Grim would go with him. He said that sure enough that was his will. Thorkel turned straightway westward without going to meet Ede, nor halted he, till he came to Sailingsdale tongue. Snorri the priest welcomes him with great blitheness. Thorkel told him that his journey had sped lucklessly. Snorri said it had turned out well, for Grim looks to me a man endowed with good luck, and my will is that you make matters up with him handsomely. But now, my friend, I would like to counsel you to leave off trade journeyings, and to settle down and marry, and become a chief as befits your high birth. Thorkel answered, Often your counsels have stood me in good stead. And he asked if Snorri had bethought him of the woman he should woo. Snorri answers, You must woo the woman who is the best match for you, and that woman is Gudrun, Osvif's daughter. Thorkel said it was true that a marriage with her would be an honorable one, but, says he, I think her fierce heart and reckless mindedness weigh heavily, for she will want to have her husband, Bolli, avenged. Besides, it is said that on this matter there is some understanding between her and Thorgils Hallason, and it may be that this will not be altogether to his liking. Otherwise, Gudrun pleases me well. Snorri said, I will undertake to see that no harm shall come to you from Thorgils, but as to the revenge for Bolli, I am rather in hopes that concerning that matter some change will have befallen before these seasons this year are out. Thorkel answered, It may be that these be no empty words you are speaking now. But as to the revenge of Bolli, that does not seem to me more likely to happen now than it did a while ago, unless into that strife some of the greater men may be drawn. Snorri said, I should be well pleased to see you go abroad once more this summer, to let us see then what happens. Thorkel said so it should be, and they parted, leaving matters where they now stood. Thorkel went west over Broadfirth country to his ship. He took Grim with him abroad. They had a good summer voyage, and came to the south of Norway. Then Thorkel said to Grim, You know how the case stands, and what things happened to bring about our acquaintance, so I need say nothing about that matter. But I would fain that it should turn out better than at one time it seemed likely it would. I have found you a valiant man, and for that reason I will so part from you, as if I had never borne you any grudge. I will give you as much merchandise as you need in order to be able to join the guild of good merchants. But do not settle down here in the north of this land, for many of Ede's kinsmen are about on trading journeys, who bear you heavy ill will. Grim thanked him for these words, and said he could never have thought of asking for as much as he offered. At parting, Thorkel gave to Grim a goodly deal of merchandise, and many men said that this deed bore the stamp of a great man. After that Grim went east in the Wick, settled there, and was looked upon as a mighty man of his ways, and therewith comes to an end what there is to be told about Grim. Thorkel was in Norway through the winter, and was thought a man of much account. He was exceeding wealthy in chattels. Now this matter must be left for a while, and the story must be taken up out in Iceland. So let us hear what matters befell there, for tidings to be told of, whilst Thorkel was abroad.